Fun fact, Rachel and I communicate daily. We're dependent on each other for most of our projects, especially this presentation, but we've never met in person. We wanted to prepare this talk together because it actually challenges many of the assumptions we made earlier in our careers. We both started our careers in management consulting, a world that values in-person collaboration, confidentiality, and home of the perfection culture. Our earlier experiences gave us incredible foundations for problem solving, but also came with unintended behaviors that we had to shed to solve our team's cross-functional communication challenges. We're excited to share our journeys with you today and introduce you to the ways of working that have made two women who take comfort in predictability thrive in a world of constant change. But before we introduce you to our new framework, we want to share with you what we've learned about the problem in our journeys and why your dependency problem is actually a project communication problem. We'll then share why a framework for cross-functional communication is more important than any tool, and leave you with tips to get started with your team tomorrow, or why not today? So first, let us vent about our problems. Think about the last 5 to 10 projects you were on. How much time did your team spend planning? Trying to dream up all the possible scenarios, making sure you had a really detailed plan, getting your stakeholders to sign off, only to have something unexpected happen. Maybe a team member left, or there was an unforeseen security issue, possibly a global pandemic. Was all that really necessary? Let me rephrase. Thinking back, was all that time spent planning useful? Were you able to predict the future? What I've learned in my 15 years of project management is that no matter how much data we have or how experienced my team is, we cannot predict the future. Thorough planning will not predict your project's success. It's time to rebalance the time we spend communicating and the time we spend planning. You're actually probably already pretty good at communicating within your team. You have rituals like stand-ups and tools like dashboards for that. You also probably have well-established communication rituals and powerful products for communicating with your customer, from empathy mapping to release notes to service desks. What we all tend to forget or move to the bottom of our to-do list is communicating and connecting across teams. Because the reality is no team works in isolation. We all need to interact with other teams to move work forward. We just don't build communicating with other teams into our daily life. So it ends up falling off our to-do list and showing up later as unforeseen circumstances, when in fact, they could and should have been seen earlier. Take the most recent project I ran. We were launching a webpage on Atlassian.com. It was for customers to discover and sign up for a new product. What we had thought was going to be a pretty straightforward project to just plug a new page into a pre-existing experience turned out to take 79 people 3 weeks longer than expected to complete. As the project owner, I did not consider this project a failure at all. Our goal wasn't to minimize dependencies. It wasn't to follow version 1 of the project plan. Our goal was to ship the best possible experience to our customers, and we did exactly that. But it took a lot of intentional communications among our teams. Had we not spent as much time as we did communicating, we would have missed getting advice from a subject matter expert who sat on the platform engineering team and identified some really critical gaps in the sign-up experience. I'm really proud of how we ran our project because we embraced the chaos of communicating across functions. And if we hadn't, we would have blown our only shot at making a good first impression with customers. And I'm also so glad that we didn't have to rely on this type of nightmare to communicate across our teams. Let's be real. No one reads status spreadsheets. I know I've just spent the first 5 minutes of this talk waxing on about how important frameworks are and tools are not, but let me tell you, if the success of the project that I just talked to you about would have rested on my team filling out and reading a spreadsheet like this every week, I would have handed in my resignation on the spot. We all hate status spreadsheets, which I think has unfairly translated into all of us dreading communicating across teams. The thing is, it doesn't have to be this bad. What we need to do is enable two-way open conversation among project teams. The same way kind of Twitter enables open and direct communication between, let's say, like Elon Musk and renewable energy supporters and experts around the world. The thing is, none of us want to spend more time in one-on-one meetings to do this. So rather than spending more time planning or more time in one-on-ones, what we need is to enable loops of communication across teams, projects, and programs. Atlassian, tired of filling out status spreadsheets, has done just that. And we call it the loop. It's a framework for healthy and effective project communication for teams of teams. And we call it the loop because after adopting these rituals, our teams feel more in the loop with the goings on around the org, which enabled us to move work forward more effectively across functions. Underpinning the framework are 4 core beliefs about healthy and effective teamwork, some of which Rachel and I used to disagree with. First, the only way cross-functional collaboration works is if you open up work that is not yet done. As management consultants, Rachel and I were scared to share imperfect drafts. Today, we're perfectionists in full recovery, reaping the benefits of getting feedback early and often, because we've learned how to set expectations with our stakeholders about the phase of our team's work. Next, we all have to use the same vocabulary to talk about projects. I was actually looking at project statuses across Atlassian a couple years ago. I saw a dozen projects that were all marked green, which means on track. Then I read the descriptions and realized that each of the 12 projects' interpretation of on track was completely different. So one project didn't have a committed team yet, another one was waiting for legal approval, and one was actually done. That's actually no longer an issue at Atlassian since we've adopted the loop. And because every team, department, every intern, every exec, we all use the same language to talk about project status. Third, effective cross-functional communication needs curation, not automation. I don't know about you, but right now, as I'm speaking, I'm drowning in chat notifications. I've got 600 unread emails, and I know there are at least a dozen documents that are waiting for my comments. No matter how much smarter our tools get, there's still just too much content out there. Atlassian teams have started holding ourselves accountable for character limits, kind of like Twitter posts, forcing us to be more deliberate about what content we share, with who, and when. And let me tell you, it's curation that's making us much better communicators, way more than automation ever could. And last but not least, there is no loop if communication is one-sided. We believe that showing you're paying attention is as critical to keep communication flowing among teams. It's the worst feeling in the world to belabor over writing a status report only to have no one acknowledge it. So part of the loop is creating rituals that keep stakeholders engaged and teams motivated. The loop started by observing anti-patterns and best practices of teams outside of Atlassian and within our 4 walls. To make it the repeatable framework it is today, we've had some key champions at leading organizations. Rachel has been the one working with our partner organizations to refine the framework, and she's going to share with you some of their trials and tribulations. Rachel?
Thanks, Mary. One of the things that I love about what I do is collaborating with customers, and this is exactly what the loop was. An amalgamation of tried and tested techniques we saw top companies in the world practicing, and we looked to codify these into a framework that can be operationalized easily. This is the brainchild of how we at Atlassian have scaled communication, learnings our founders have taken from top tech companies, and collaboration with our other partners and customers. These ways of working have been practiced in many different organizations, all with their tools of choice. This really emphasizes the loop is a framework for project comms that is software agnostic. The core beliefs you hear today can be taken and incorporated tomorrow. And the first belief that Mary mentioned earlier is opening up your work in progress. This is a great one to start with because it's something that you as an individual can adjust your mentality on and lead by example starting today. In traditional project management, where so much time is spent on planning, you often realize nothing ever seems to go according to plan. Surely you've all experienced it. sitting in your meeting rooms, spending hours and hours coming up with quarterly or yearly plans. And then a couple of weeks in, something happens that throws everything out the window. How many of your plans became undone during the pandemic last year? Instead of over-planning, the best teams thrive by adapting. And to do so, they need to be empowered by the right information early and often. Sounds scary, right? Mary and I both get it. Like she said, we're recovering perfectionists here. And I still feel totally out of my comfort zone when I have to share a draft before I'm confident in it, because I already know that it needs work. But think about it this way. One of my mentors once described this really great 2x2 to me. When you're sharing a piece of work for feedback, there's this time by expected quality of work correlation. As you spend more time on something before sharing it, your stakeholders are exponentially expecting your quality of work to be more and more impressive. So here's a hack. Manage their expectations. If you share back your work in progress earlier in this curve, it may be a mess at first, but hey, they know you've only been working at it for a day. And this way you can get feedback quickly, iterate early, and take your stakeholders on the journey of co-creation, working as a team to do your best work. That process of continually sharing, getting feedback, and then iterating, that's a communication loop right there. The benefits of this approach are your project gets input from others, often experts, before irreversible decisions are made. You reduce the pressure on the individual to be presenting perfect work every time. And that feels really great. You then put the onus on the team to work together. So for example, when Mary and I first started working on this talk, we opted to share one of our early first drafts with the team for feedback. And although we pulled together a skeleton slide deck about 5 minutes before the actual session, we were able to get so much value from the team's input to evolve it into the awesome talk it is today. You can also start executing leaner and build sooner because you're creating low fidelity plans and leaving room for adjustment. We're working with the IT department within a large global consulting firm, and they've really found value in opening up their work in progress. And if the value of transparency can be so well articulated within a confidential industry like consulting, then I think it's safe to say that everyone can benefit from a little bit more of this openness. By opening up their operational work and sharing it internally for anyone to follow. This created visibility for the leads into what was happening across more than 400 initiatives around the world, to identify duplication in work and find opportunities to collaborate. Just doing simple things like keeping a work in progress document accessible, sharing your work in phases, dropping updates where your teams live, rather than in secured files, one-on-one pings, and private email threads. Those are things that will empower teams to save time spent talking and increase their time spent doing. But once you're sharing work openly, it doesn't help if no one can understand you. And as teams scale, more comms happen, and it's inevitable that teams start to develop their own internal colloquialisms that make intra-team communication faster, but often at the expense of slowing down inter-team communication, or as Mary referred to it before, project comms. The immediate response could be to add constraints by locking everyone down into one tool. But I think we all realize that's neither realistic nor sustainable. Rather, it should be about providing guardrails to help teams speak a common language so comms are clear and meaningful. For example, our good friends at Canva are really big on common vocabulary. They have all sorts of unique terminology that represent their culture. Quarters are referred to and run as seasons. OKR language was seen as too corporate. Goals are projects, stages are phases. You can see it's incredibly important for them to get terminology aligned to ensure their teams are on the same page when cross-collaborating. So long as they have confidence they've built a common understanding, they should feel empowered to work in the tools that suit each of their teams best. And the benefits of practicing common vocabulary over common tooling are firstly, dependent teams can easily identify relationships between previously siloed pieces of work. Stakeholders are able to access and digest information without confusion, empowering them to self-serve. And lastly, speed to action increases because there's just less back and forth required to interpret your messages. Instead, you're able to get straight to the meaty feedback, the decisions, or next steps, as your stakeholders already have that preloaded context. One easy way we build a common language in Atlassian for projects is for every project we start, we'll ask owners to answer 3 simple questions. What are you doing? Why are you doing it? And what does success look like? By having this, it provides any stakeholder coming across the project upfront context about the what and the why. And having this common language helps avoid situations like those times when you're with your team debating about coriander or cilantro, and then half an hour later, you actually realize you're all really talking about the same thing. Now we've talked about the importance of communicating openly and aligning on a common vocab. The next part of effective comms is the content. If you're trying to catch up with what's happened in a project in the last week, do you want to be reading something like this, or this? I think I know which one I want to be reading. This is where we believe in curation over automation, so that instead of leaving stakeholders with the what, updates are conveying the so what. What's interesting is that when we started researching status reporting with potential users, most people's first instinct was to jump into this picturesque solution of automated reports created through Jira data, giving end-to-end visibility into work at a task level. And this was the case with one of our customers, ePilot, who initially wanted to see updates communicating number of tickets completed in an epic, progress percentage for the project, and other stats like that. But once they started thinking about who would consume this quantitative information and what they would get out of that data, they shifted to this major aha moment. Maybe curated written updates were more reflective of reality than cold, hard, automated facts in this case. In many situations, estimates on scope are arbitrary, and stakeholders actually don't care about the stats as much as knowing how is this project going overall. Research also backs the need of curated communications for de-risking decision-making. In the DIKW pyramid, applying context, meaning, and insight into a project enables better decision-making for stakeholders, because rather than presenting them with the data, you're presenting them with this top-level wisdom of so what. ePilot have now been practicing project comms across product, sales, and marketing teams with a short written update that focuses on the key headlines of the last week. And the benefits of doing so are you can build trust with teams through predictable and meaningful context. You enable focus in readers so they know exactly what they should care about and why. And you drive action by using comms to mobilize stakeholders with clear asks. So the next time you communicate your project updates to your teams, which of these 3 are you going to show them? Lastly, the 3 beliefs I've shared so far makes it sound like the onus of project comms is all on the team doing the work. But we believe effective communication is a two-way street, and everyone involved has a responsibility. In the case of people who need to primarily read updates, start showing that you're paying attention. It's a basic courtesy when you speak to someone to listen, respond in micro-feedback loops like nodding, making eye contact, and sometimes even saying, that's interesting. That helps people feel heard. Reading an update and saying nothing may be the easier path, and it's even something we have struggled with at Atlassian. So much so that, in fact, we used to see this anti-pattern of project owners thinking no one was reading their updates, and they'd write at the bottom of an update, if anyone's reading this right now, I'll shout you a coffee. Lesson learned. If you want free coffees, you should start reading your updates. In response, we tried to encourage simple ways to acknowledge and engage. Dropping feedback, asking questions, celebrating outcomes are all good examples of this. Even something so simple as leaving a reaction can motivate your project owners. By being an active follower, you'll see benefits like project owners increasing their efforts to communicate meaningfully via updates. In a study, 70% of employees said they were more motivated when they felt like their efforts were being recognized. You'll see better outcomes because engaged followers leave great insights on updates to help unblock or improve work in progress. And lastly, you get this chance to build a culture that celebrates consistent and effective comms, so you can recognize behaviors that unlock the flow of work. Showing that you're paying attention is important to close the loop of communication. After all, don't you hate it when you reach out to someone and it might show that they've seen the message, but they don't actually respond for weeks, if at all? Did they actually read it? Do they even care? This belief shows your counterparts that, yes, you care.
I know Rachel cares because she never leaves me on red, and it's helped us build a really strong relationship, even though we've never met each other and live halfway across the world. So I think everybody knows, if you're familiar with Atlassian, that we are big believers in starting with why, which explains why we started this talk with the beliefs behind the framework. But we're also believers of just getting started, period. And getting started with the loop really only takes 3 steps practiced weekly. Friday, communicate outwards by writing an update. Monday, read a curated digest of updates about projects that you care about. And then use those updates to give and get feedback so that the team's work benefits from fast, open feedback loops. That's the loop in practice. 3 easy steps. And it may sound like I'm oversimplifying what Rachel just talked us through, but this is the exact process Atlassian teams have been following for years. And these 3 steps have solved our worst dependency problems. I'll admit, there was hurdles. The biggest hurdle we had to overcome was remembering to make time to communicate, because we're all busy. So a group of Atlassian engineers decided to take this into their own hands and make it easier for all of us to build healthy communication habits. And they made the loop into a product. Is this the moment you've all been waiting for? Of course we did this. Introducing Team Central Beta. It's essentially your team-to-team communication loop personified in product form. Think of it this way. If the Agile framework were personified as a product, it'd be Jira, right? Same for the loop in Team Central. If you buy into anything that Rachel just said, Team Central, it's the best way to action it. While no specific tool is necessary to practice the loop, we know you can't practice it alone. The loop is not only a team sport, it's a sport best played across teams, which requires convincing and reminding people who you really have no official influence over to write and read updates on a weekly basis. So if you're like me and you dread nagging people to do things, Team Central can help. Here's how. Team Central has nudges built in. So your success in improving team-to-team comms won't rely on your ability to beg other teams to do the right thing. On Friday, project owners are reminded to write a weekly status update. And then on Monday, Team Central sends every stakeholder a weekly summary directly to their inbox. It includes a little nudge to acknowledge the weekly updates, show that you're paying attention. Not only are these nudges less annoying, the writing and reading experience is actually delightful. And guess what? Consistent. With Team Central, every status update must answer the same 2 questions. What's the project status? On track, at risk, or off track? And when will the project be done? You can select a quarter, a month, or a day. Team Central also gives teams much more opportunity to make digital asynchronous updates more engaging than in-person updates. Of course, with the added benefit of being much more efficient. Emojis, videos, screenshots, charts, as you can see here, are just a few of the ways Team Central helps project owners craft engaging updates that encourage stakeholders to give feedback and keep the loop of communication flowing among teams. Last but not least, with this expandable section here of notes, you can truly write updates that satiate every type of stakeholder. So followers who just want to keep a finger on the pulse, they can just scan through the bullets. But there are some stakeholders who want more detail, and they can have the opportunity to deep dive with just 1 click. So once you've posted your update, Team Central is going to do all the work for you to keep the team-to-team feedback loop flowing. Thanks to Team Central's weekly updates feed. Does it look familiar? It's inspired by the news feeds of the world's best social networks and designed to make opening up your work in progress easy and efficient, because we all know it can be scary and cumbersome. We borrowed the personalized news feed concept from social media, but we added important touches of curation to ensure Team Central's updates feed does not become as noisy as the social media news feeds have become. First, your feed is curated by week. You can click the left and right side arrows to get summaries from past and future weeks. Second, we curate by status. You can get a quick glance of all projects by their status for that week in the 5 boxes up top here, or click any of those boxes to filter your feed by project status. And last, Maybe least obvious, but most important, this newsfeed is curated by interest. So you're only seeing updates for projects you follow. So just like social media, you control who and what is in your personalized feed every week. Less noise, less chaos, more curation, and just the right amount of automation. The loop is the framework that is going to teach your teams what healthy and effective comms look like. Team Central is what makes it truly predictable. Team Central is helping you get your project stakeholders to read your updates, because to be a loop, communication cannot be one way. And it also helps you slowly evolve into a predictable cadence of status communication, not just up your reporting line, but across functions. You see, the loop and Team Central enable teams to easily and effectively share updates and get fast feedback from every direction they need it, from senior stakeholders to subject matter experts in other functions to new team members with a fresh set of eyes. With fast flowing feedback, everyone not only stays in the loop, work moves forward with the best insights from across the org, no meeting required. We built everything we talked about today into a self-serve experience live now on Atlassian.com/loop. We know that even if you're fully bought into every single word you heard in this talk, ultimately you have to convince your teammates and your partners in other teams to buy into trying a new way of working. Change is hard. The Loop site is designed to make change easier. It has diagrams, step-by-step instructions, stats, research, pictures, whatever language you speak. It's going to help you rally other teams to abandon their outdated communication rituals and dump that status spreadsheet. What it is the accumulation of 5 years of research and Rachel talking to customers galore and understanding what the world's top companies, from Facebook to Google to Canva, what they're all doing, and pinpointing what the common communication rituals are that helped free their teams from their dependency problems. The loop can be summarized best by these 4 foundational beliefs. First, open up your work in progress and celebrate imperfections. Second, agree on a common vocabulary for talking about projects across functions. Third, curate weekly updates, don't automate them. And fourth, most importantly, keep communication flowing across teams by showing that you are engaged. If there's anything you took away from this talk, we hope that communication is the most effective tool you and your teams have to manage our crazy, unpredictable world. We wanted to share the loop outside of Atlassian because we're in search of teams to inspire us. Teams who have the courage to be vulnerable, even when the world feels full of uncertainty. Teams who are willing to admit what they don't know, but get started anyways. And teams who believe that opening up their work, warts and all, will make them a stronger team and set a better example for future teams. We wanted to end on this quote from our fellow female leader, Malala Yousafzai, because we believe so much in the power of effective communication at work and in today's world. We know you're all doing important work, and communication across teams can really get in the way of feeling like you're making progress. We hope you leave today with a kernel of hope that the antidote to your frustrations is simpler than you may have thought, and with the courage to be one of the teams that inspires us to keep communicating even when we're unsure what's next. Thank you so much for joining us today. Rachel and I love hearing from teams who are as passionate about navigating cross-team collaboration. If you'd like to continue the conversation, which has admittedly been pretty one-sided so far, please join us in our Team Central community channel on the Atlassian community. Have a great day, everyone.